Welcome to the OK Book Club. This is Book 3, Episode 4, The War That Saved My Life by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. This is the last episode for this book, so you want to not listen until you finish the book, and specifically it's chapters 35 through 46, pages 249 through 316. We're going to go through what happened, my reflections, my thoughts about what is going on here with the characters, the writing, everything. And I will tell you, I am running on caffeine at this point. Yes, unfortunately, my friend Jasper, our dog, he's coming up on 2 years old. He still got an upset stomach. It's back. And he got me up twice last night. Egregious. This is getting so tedious. And by the way, digressing right from the beginning, in my classroom, we've had a reputation going back, this will be my 19th year teaching, that we have these power words. And they're high vocabulary words. It all goes back to my daughter. And she was upset that she couldn't get into Amherst. You needed to have a 2,000 on your SAT score. The best she could do, despite multiple times taking the SAT, was an 1,800, which is a good score. But it just wasn't enough at the time. Why? This was all about her wanting to go to this school, but the coach, she was recruited for field hockey. Dad boasting and gloating. Spoiler alert, here we go. I was so proud of my daughter. She ended up becoming the North Jersey Player of the Year in field hockey from the Star Ledger newspaper and the Bergen Record newspaper. Her team won multiple awards, county championships, sectional championships. And in her freshman year, she ended up going to college in New Jersey, and they won a national championship, Division III national championship, 2014. Anyway, getting back to the story, at that point, she hadn't chosen a school, and she was being recruited, and Amherst was a school that she really wanted to go to. But the coach says, I can't get you on the team unless you have this SAT score. And at the time, listen, who knows why these things happen, but we had dinner one night, and I said, Lauren, this was prior to her taking the SATs. It was her junior year. I said, Lauren, you look melancholy. And she looked up at me, and she said, what does melancholy mean? And that was the moment, I'll never forget it, light bulb moment, just getting into teaching at the time. I was determined to make sure that my students would have a high vocabulary. So my second grade students, we say all these big power words all the time. And I just thought of it because I said, this is egregious. This is getting tedious, right? I'm ecstatic. I'm melancholy. I loathe broccoli. So, you know, my kids, when they were growing up, they had all these huge vocabulary books, and it was memorizing after memorizing just to get ready for the SAT section of vocabulary. Just regurgitating it, ingesting it and regurgitating these words that had no context for their life, no relevance. And when you teach that way and when you learn that way, it's not going to stick. So, you know, part of what I did with my master's thesis was this idea about how children at any age and even adults can learn higher vocabulary words. And that is the old expression, use it or you're going to lose it. Meaning, I just use these words all day long and I make it a big deal. We have fun with it. I have the students go home and their homework assignment is to use the word with their parents. And it's not enough to know the definition of the word. That's not what it's about, right? It's like reading. Who cares about learning the how to read and saying the words out loud? The purpose of reading is to be able to understand what you read. So when you learn new words, it's about using the words and using them properly, the usage of the words. So I'm constantly trying to intentionally make sure that I introduce a new word each day. All the kids love it. And they look at the expression, not only from their peers out on the playground, like, wow, what are you saying? But their parents and their reactions to them using these high level words at home. Mom, is everything okay? You seem melancholy tonight. Or whatever it is. Anyway, definitely went off on a tangent there, but let's get back to the book. Forget about back to the book. Let's start with the book. I mean, I was talking about Jasper for too much, and that ended up segueing into stories about power words. Chapter 36, all of a sudden, talk about a new word that I just learned by reading this chapter. They were being strafed. Strafed is being bombed by airplanes from above, and that's what ended up happening. Lady Thornton ended up banging on Susan's door in the morning. Everything was chaotic and crazy because basically what we learned about in the last episode, Dunkirk, all 370,000 soldiers, French but mostly British soldiers, were trapped at that beach, and they were all being attacked and they were all being evacuated. At least over several days, there was this massive evacuation. And where did they end up arriving when they were dropped off in Britain? Was right there in their town of Kent, where Susan, Lady Thornton, Jamie, and Ada lived. And amazingly, Ada right away doesn't think about it, doesn't get scared, just like she hopped on butter. It's something innate in her that she just all of a sudden said, "You're going to Fred's, Jamie. You'll help him in his place. I'm going to the village. I'm a junior WVS member," I said, making it up on the spot. "Lady Thornton expects me to do my duty like a soldier. I expect you to do yours." So immediately, Jamie, with his mouth open wide, his jaw to the floor, is just not believing this. And our hero, Ada, goes to help all these soldiers that are coming off the boats, smelling of blood, coming in one by one into an evacuation area with horrible injuries that no one wants to see, the stench, just everything imaginable that you can think of. They even go into details with the men didn't have any control of their bowels. So Ada took up this job and no one looked around. Everyone was just looking for someone else to help. So she helped, primarily bringing water back and forth to the soldiers. And children, when you're faced with the reality of something like this, whether you're the person wounded or helping the person wounded, there's no insecurities anymore. There's no modesty. You actually become numb. There's no squeamishness. You just keep working. And they had shifts about when they could sleep, and then other people would take over, and you only slept for 3 hours or more. That was it, and then you were back to work. And our hero, Ada, did all this. And here begins the transformation of Ada. At the end of chapter 36 on page 258, having seen all this, she saw a soldier talk to her about helping him write a letter. His arms felt numb, and she goes back to get someone to help because she still wasn't good at writing. And she comes back, and he is dead. And at the end of the chapter, she's thinking this, but at the same time, I felt different. There was a before Dunkirk version of me and an after Dunkirk version. The after Dunkirk version was stronger, less afraid. It had been awful, but I hadn't quit. I had persisted in battle. I had won. And there's a sense also, although the author didn't explicitly write this, friends, it's almost as if she's thinking back on her flashbacks and her behavior and her perseverating over a horrible life with her mother and just not being able to function. And it just seems like, no, that was easy. Why would I be acting this way when actually everything could be completely worse? It was life or death. And really, anything other than that is just silly. If you can get through this time period, everything else is just looked at a lot differently. And at this point, as we get through chapter 37, Lady Thornton says, you have to get the children out of here for their own sake, right? And Susan takes charge at this point, and she tells Lady Thornton in no uncertain terms, no, separating them will kill them both. Lady Thornton had said, we just need to get them out, even if they had to go separate guardians. And Lady Thornton said no, and she put her foot down, literally and figuratively. And as we end chapter 37, we get another glimpse into the fact that Ada is coming around to Susan. I lean my head against Susan, the tiniest bit. She didn't move. This is after everything calmed down, and they go back to their home. I leaned in a bit more. She put her arm around my shoulders so that I was nestled against her. As I drifted into sleep, I thought I felt her lips brush the top of my head. But then, of course, in Kimberly Brubaker Bradley fashion, the next sentence is, the first air raid was worse than Christmas Eve. Another hook to get us going to the next chapter. This is what the author has done throughout, and it's very, very effective. Bombs come, they go down into the shelter, and Ada flips out because of the smells, the cramped condition. She's having flashbacks to being sent to the cabinet under the sink. The Battle of Britain had begun, and they ended up in this little tiny shelter under the grounds almost every night. The bombs hadn't come in daytime yet, but Ada's saying she knew that they could. And on page 271, I underlined this and I made it note, one of the best lines in a book. And she's talking about, again, Susan. It was hard enough to cope with Susan. How could I ever cope without her? And then this is something I started thinking that I hope, friends, you had been thinking, which is you talk about probably one of the worst places you could live would be right close to an airfield. The enemy, the Germans, where are they going to bomb? They're going to bomb the enemy's airplanes. And where are the airplanes? Right next to Ada's home. Just crazy, right? They got to listen, that's their home, but don't you think it would be better to move somewhere else? When I'm reading here, in the beginning of chapter 9, I have notes all over the place. Get away from the airfield. And by the way, another historical informational item here, these air raids basically said, hey, listen, planes are coming from above, get shelter. But apparently when there was actually an invasion and army troops coming on land, it wasn't just an air raid sound, a siren going off, but church bells would ring. And now in this chapter 39, one of the best moments of the book, she spots a spy. She's looking over down on the ocean, and she thinks that this is a spy because he's just one person inside a boat. She sees him bury something in the sand, which she had learned is another clue. What's in the sand? As she learned later on, this was communication gear that ultimately the spy would be able to retrieve and send messages back to the Germans as to what he's found out. And why did she think also this was a spy? Because there were barbed wires down at this beach and no one would be setting foot on this shore. So sure enough, she runs to the police station, but the police, and at least the man at the front counter, doesn't believe her, is kind of mocking her. Oh, this isn't as cute. All this information. You're such a little girl. And what does she say? She gets angry, especially as almost he kind of mocks her foot. To make her point, she said, "My bad foot's a long way from my brain." And how is it that she came to say this and have the bravery and the courage to say this out loud? She said to herself, "I thought of what Susan would do. I drew myself up taller and glared at the man." It's like, yeah, go Ada. And again, you're also saying, great job, Susan. See, being a role model, doing what's right. When she came into the school, and Ada saw the way that she confronted the teacher when the teacher was doing something wrong. This pays off, right? So she was right. They arrested this guy even though he spoke great English. He was, in fact, a spy. And the gentleman, the policeman at the counter, ultimately came back and knocked on the door and apologized. And all of a sudden, Ada's confidence went through the roof. She was celebrated throughout this little community, and everyone knew that she had caught a German spy. And as we go into chapter 40 on page 282, talk about a very useful tip to write when you're trying to write some kind of comparison, some type of metaphor to make your point sink in. To make sure it's clear to you, start your sentences with two words, as if. And how is it that, why is this used in this case? The writer is trying to make sure that we, the readers, understand how this lifted Ada's personality, how it lifted her confidence, everything. It was as if I'd been born in the village, as if I had been born with two strong feet, as if I really was someone important, someone loved. Very simple. I've taught this now for years. It's called a metaphor. You can use it in a lot of ways, but basically it's bringing home the point. Let's just say as another way to write the beginning of these sentences. When you have a certain feeling, you have something that's going on, immediately attach it to some type of comparison, a metaphor. And what's interesting, they don't want to give a lot of information out about what happened, why he was a spy, who he was, how it all happened, because the reader is introduced to double spies, and they are the most fascinating. In other words, they are going to flip him by basically using him now to spy on the Germans. And the idea being the Germans would never know that he was arrested and then turned. Turned meaning now all of a sudden is on the side of the Britons. But, this could have been originally someone that was British, and then obviously since he spoke English was turned to spy for the Germans, and now he's going back. They call this a double agent. Really interesting. We also learn on page 284, 285, further evidence that Ada is growing up. She ends up learning that some of the air pilots that had visited them on Christmas had actually passed away with a lot of these bombs and the evacuation of Dunkirk. And she said to herself, I understood why I'd been upset at Christmas. I felt overwhelmed. I really couldn't help myself. But now, thinking back, it seemed a little silly to be unhappy about a dress when pilots were dead. So at the end of this chapter, chapter 40, probably one of the biggest hooks ever not only in this book, but probably ever. The months go on, not a lot is happening, and all of a sudden, after walking with Butter in the field and Susan approaching her, she yells out to Susan, "Hey, I did you see Butter jump? Did you?" And then I recognize the woman standing behind Susan. Ma'am. Ma'am immediately starts berating her two own children, just like it was in the beginning of the book. It's just in these pages, 288, 289, 90, 91, 291, you loathe this woman. How can anybody be this mean? She said, "We're going home." She's putting down Ada with her foot. What are you doing dressed up in these fancy clothes? You don't deserve this. That's not who you are. Just amazing. And Ada pushes back, and so does Susan. Susan says, "I'll go to the police. They'll listen to you, Ada. They'll listen to us. You can stay here with me." The pause that followed seemed to last a lifetime. It, unfortunately, friends, as you're reading this, what you do realize is this is her mother. She has the legal rights to her own children. Ma'am sucked in her breath. Jamie snuffled. I looked at Susan and said, "You didn't want us." Like, what? What are you doing, Ada? Why are you saying this? Susan looked straight back at me. She said, "That was last year. I want you now." Yeah, go Susan. The police might let Ada stay with Susan, but they had no reason. They would have no reason to take Jamie from Ma'am. Ma'am never locked Jamie up. I said, "I can't leave Jamie." Susan looked back at me and very slowly nodded. Ma'am muttered something under her breath. She yanked Jamie down the road. I followed. When I looked back at Susan, she was already on the other side of the garden wall, unbuckling the girth of my saddle. She didn't look up. She didn't say goodbye. Ah! You're thinking to yourself, no, this can't be. This can't be. Ma'am gets her back to their new home, and Ada is protesting. You're cheering for her. "There's nothing wrong with me," I said. My foot's a long way from my brain." Yeah. And then immediately the writer writes slap. She's hit by her mother. And at this point you're saying, "Escape, Ada, get out of here." You can read this for yourself. It's just really just alarming reading a lot of this. Ma'am comes back to her. "I don't need the world shaming me for having a crippled girl. I don't care what you did somewhere else. You're with me again. You'll do as I say. You disobey me, I'll make you wish you had. And you're a cripple. That's all you are. A cripple and nothing but a cripple. You've never been anything else. Got that?" Susan wasn't ashamed of me. Well, bully for her. She should have been. Ma'am's eyes glittered. "Disobey me," pointing at Jamie, "and I'll take it out on him. Got that?" There's some people that just, I'm not going to say it. You know what you're thinking about this horrible woman, ma'am. It just doesn't seem realistic. Today? No way. It's horrible to say, but some people just don't deserve to be a parent. And again, Ada is going back now to doing somersaults in her head. Why me? What's wrong with me? It's all my fault, right? And she says to herself, "Ma'am could have fixed my foot. She could have fixed it when I was a baby, and she could fix it now. She didn't want to. She wanted me to be a cripple. It didn't make sense." And I'm starting to cry here. "Susan loves you," Jamie said. "They stick together. She loves both of us," I said. "I know," said Jamie. I want Bovril. I didn't reply. I drifted off to sleep. Sometime before Ma'am came home, and as I did, I thought one word: war. At last I understood what I was fighting and why, and Ma'am had no idea how strong a fighter I'd become. You read this book and you cannot not root for this girl. So she settles into her horrible life again, chapter 43, and Ma'am goes to work. She ends up snooping around the house and she finds her birth certificate that, yes, she was born on May 13th, 1929. She finds out, yes, she's 11 years old. She finds Jamie's birth certificate, and it's almost like Jamie knows, and he's yelling, making loud noises as they come up the stairs. And thankfully, she puts everything away. She covertly puts them in her pocket, all these important documents of who she is, before Ma'am walks into the door. Can you imagine if Ma'am caught her going through her things? And what do we learn as we're going through this chapter, chapter 43? Turns out the only reason Ma'am came for them is that it ended up costing her money for people to watch her own kids. And because it was costing her money, she went out and got her kids. Ada confronts her about this. And listen to this, 305 and page 306. We're learning about why Ma'am is so horrible. She brings up her husband, Ada's father. I read about him in the newspaper. He would have fixed my foot. As they're going back and forth, Ada's challenging her own mother. He wanted to, Ma'am said. He was the one that wanted babies. It was him always rocking you, always singing to you. I felt tears dripping down my cheeks. I hadn't even realized I was crying. You never wanted us. You don't want us now. Ma'am's eyes blazed. You're right. I don't. You never wanted us. And why would I, Ma'am said. It was all him, calling me unnatural, wanting babies all the time. Then I got stuck with a cripple, and then a baby, and then no husband. I never wanted either one of you. I'm reading this verbatim because it's so important. Jamie made a little noise. I knew he was crying, but I couldn't look at him yet. So you don't need to keep us now. You don't have to pay. We'll be gone in the morning. We'll be gone for good. Ma'am got up. She took her purse and hat. She turned back to me. I can get rid of you without paying anything? I nodded. She grinned. It was her stuffing Ada into the cabinet grin. Is that a promise? She said. All my life I would remember those words. I said yes. And the next chapter I wrote, unrealistic. I mean, really again, is she this horrible? In the story, she is. The next morning, both Jamie and Ada are crying. They're hugging each other. They realize what's in front of them. Jamie says, I want to go home. Home is now with Susan. Ada starts showing the marriage certificate, all these official documents, his birth certificate and everything. All of a sudden, a sound came from the open window, louder and louder, an air raid. They were in the middle of the city, and they had no idea where a shelter was. Immediately, a bomb exploded overhead. They're scrambling to their feet. Everyone's going crazy, trying to find a shelter, trying to get away from the bombs. And thankfully, they found one. And friends, all of this action, which you cannot stop reading. Unfortunately, we're on page 310, chapter 45. There's only 315 pages in the book. We only got 5 more pages, and all this is happening. The bombs stop after a few days. They come out of the shelter and coming towards us, picking her way through the rumble and debris, is a small figure with frizzy blonde hair poking out the sides of her hat. She looked like a thin, very determined witch. I stared, disbelieving. My voice dried up in my mouth. Not Jamie. Susan! She screamed. Oh, my dears, Susan shouted. What a disaster. What a miracle. You're all right. You're both all right. And as we go into the last chapter, 3 more pages in the book. How did you find us? Jamie asked. Your mother left her letters behind. One of them had her address on it. But that building, well, it took a hit, I'm afraid. Some of the people who lived there had come back. We're standing by the rumble this morning, and one woman thought she remembered seeing you go down the stairs. I had hoped you made it to the shelter. I've been searching the shelters. I never realized that there's so many. I had a more important question. Ada's saying, why? Why did you come for us after you let us go? They're sitting in a restaurant at this point, having some tea. And I'm thinking, even though this is happening, how can they just be sitting in a restaurant having tea? It just doesn't seem realistic. But nevertheless, you'll find out, Miss Smith said, that there are different kinds of truth. It's true that your mother has a right to you. I was thinking of that when I let you go. But then I couldn't sleep. I sat in the shelter with the wretched cat, and I realized that no matter what the rules were, I should have kept you, because it was also true that you belonged to me. Do you understand that? Can you? I said, we were coming back to you this morning. Good, said Miss Smith. They go back to the train station. Susan's bringing them back. You need new crutches. Everything's going to be fine. And you need some new clothes. I nodded, grateful. I didn't have to explain. Someday I'll tell her the whole story. What I said to Ma'am and what she said to me, but not now. Maybe not for a long time. It tore a hole through my heart just to think about it. As horrible as she knew her own mother was, and what happened when she went back, it was still her mother. She was hoping and praying in her heart that things would change, but nothing did. The train back to Kent was packed. They drove through the quiet Sunday morning village and down Susan's tree-lined drive. Suddenly she gasped. I got out of the taxi and saw what she saw. The house was gone. A direct hit from a German bomb. People around looked up at the taxi as we got out. They saw us, and it was like we saw Susan in London all over again. The astonishment on their faces, the fear turning to happiness, to laughter and smiles. Susan stood frozen, her hand covering her mouth. They rushed towards us. Fred, the vicar, Stephen White, the policeman, the pilots. Lady Thornton threw her arms around Susan and burst into tears. Why didn't you tell me you were leaving, she sobbed. You never go anywhere. Why didn't you let anyone know? A blur of gray fur streaked out of the rumble straight toward Jamie. Bovril, he shrieked. The pasture lay beyond the rubble. I tried to run, but after 3 steps, Fred caught me. He's fine. Your pony's fine. He must have been on the other side of the field when the bomb hit. Tears were coursing down Fred's cheeks. It's you we were missing. We were digging for you. The sirens never went off that night. We thought we lost all 3 of you. Friends, this is the end of the book. Jamie bounced over to Susan, grinning. We've been shipwrecked, he said. Susan, still looking stunned, but at Jamie's insistence, she stroked Bovril's head. Then she put her arms around Jamie and looked directly at me. It's lucky I went after you. The 2 of you saved my life, you did. I slipped my hand into hers. A strange and unfamiliar feeling ran through me. It felt like the ocean, like sunlight, like horses, like love. I searched my mind and found the name for it, joy. So now we're even, I said. Oh man, what a great ending. I've got so much to say about this book right now, but I'll tell you what, we're going really long on this episode. That's the end of the book. Are you kidding me? One of the best books I've ever read. I got tears coming down, just choked up, reading it again for the second time. The first time, I'll never forget where I was reading it. Friends, this has been Book 3, Episode 4, The War That Saved My Life. There will be a retrospective episode. We'll go back, best parts of the book, worst parts of the book, everything about it. We'll critique it, we'll celebrate it, and go through lots of different reflections on the book. Until next time, my friends, this is the OK Book Club. Happy reading.